Hello friends, today we're going to be working on a Poulan Wild Thing model 2375, and we have a no spark condition with this. We've lost spark and I'm pretty sure it's a coil that's gone bad. We're going to buy a coil for it. You know, when you're looking for parts on these online though, it gets kind of confusing because you look at the Wild Thing 2375 and then it shows type 1, type 2, all the way up through 7 different types, and some of them have different parts than others. So in order to get the right parts for your Poulan Wild Thing, you need to know what type it is. And it took me a while to find out the trick to it, but if you come over here to the engine serial number, I don't know if we can focus on that very well or not, but you look at there's the like EPA data, the model, family, the CCs, and right below that is the serial number. You go all the way over to the very end where there's a dash, and right up there it says -1. That means this is a type 1. So if you're going to go online and look for parts for this, you need to know that dash number at the end along with the 2375 so you can make sure you get the right part. And we're going to remove the recoil cover today so we can inspect the coil and see what kind of coil this has. Because I saw two different kinds of coils and I want to make sure I get the right one. Alright, this coil or recoil repair project, anything you have to do underneath here is going to be really easy because there's 4 T25 screws that you remove. 2 on the bottom, 1 on the top left, and 1 on the top right. Once those are out, you just grasp the recoil in your hands and lift straight up, and it comes off. This would allow you to easily access and repair the pull start recoil assembly, inspect the flywheel and shaft, and the ignition module or coil, along with your primer bulb in case you need to replace that, because when these rubber balls crack, that primer bulb needs to be replaced, and this is how you would access that as well. So we're going to just check the flywheel for unusual play or rattling noises or looseness, and I feel nothing loose inside. There's no play in the inner crankshaft or the piston wrist pin that I can feel. There's no play in the crankshaft bearings. It's nice and tight. And it doesn't feel like it's actually rubbing on or binding on the coil itself. That looks fairly good. We can see a few scratches on it where some debris has gotten in there and scratched the magnets and the rotor, but that's pretty normal on a chainsaw. And in order to change the coil, we will have to pull the top cover plate off because the primary wire that goes up to the spark plug goes up underneath this top cover plate. When we get ready to change the coil, we'll do that, but in the meantime, we're just here having a look and seeing what kind of coil it is and what it looks like. And now that we see it, we can see there's 2 screws that hold the coil on. Those are actually Allen head hex screws. There's one right down there, probably I'm not sure what size that is, possibly an M4 or M5, maybe even a 3/16, but we'll find out for sure when we take it off. But there's one screw there. And then the back screw is between the kill switch wire and the primary wire, right down in that gap right there. And you remove those 2 screws and the coil will lift right off, but you won't be able to remove it until you take the top cover plate off and remove the end off the spark plug on top. Pretty easy job on this. And we're going to swap the coil out and see if that solves our problem of having no spark. Alright, we've removed the 4mm Allen wrench to remove the 2 screws holding the coil in place. And there's also a little spring clip here that keeps your wires away from moving parts so they don't get damaged, and that just pops off with a screwdriver. You see they've got to remember to move the chain, pull the cap off here, pull this clip off, and then remove the 2 4mm screws here. And the coil will come right off, which this is the old one we've taken off. And it, a lot of times if they're bad, you can't tell they're bad. This one here has a little bit of damage to the face of the primary windings here, like it's been rubbing on either some debris. There's no marks on the flywheel. There's a little bit of mark on the flywheel, like a scraping mark, like maybe a rock or something got caught up in here. So it could have been damaged from that, or it could not be bad at all. Maybe I'm just replacing this for nothing, but we got it on. Now we got to gap it. So usual gap on a coil like this is 10 to 12 thousandths of an inch. or 0.25 millimeter. So I've got this extra long set of feeler gauges, and we're gonna flip it around till we find the right size that we want. And like I said, I wanted the 0.010 or 0.254 millimeters. If you want to set a little loose, 11 or 12 is also fine, but we'll go with 11, because sometimes if you don't get it tight enough, it tightens up a little bit from tension when you let it go. We'll put it at 11 and see how that goes. But what I'm going to do is, there's a magnet here that interacts with the steel windings in the coil. So we're going to insert the feeler gauge between the flywheel and the coil. Then we're going to rotate the flywheel until the magnets are lined up here, and they draw the coil down tight against it with the feeler gauge in the way. Once it's been pulled tight, we will torque down the two 4mm mounting screws, and then we'll remove the feeler gauge, which will give us the proper gap between the coil and the flywheel. Alright, I wanted you to see how that feeler gauge fits in there. You can see the feeler gauge is wrapped around the flywheel, between the flywheel and the coil, and the coil has been pulled tight against the flywheel because of the magnet. Now that that's all locked in place, we're going to tighten down the set screws on the flywheel. Once it's tightened down, we're going to rotate the flywheel around and pull the feeler gauge out, and now we can spin it and make sure we're not actually touching the coil, which would be bad. When we're not, it feels nice and smooth going around. Oh, it's going the wrong way. It doesn't really matter which way you're spinning it until you get ready to try and start it. But there we go. We've got it set up now. We're going to check the spark and see what happens.